Hello, and welcome to the Cheap Seats. But this one is an FPL edition. We'll be doing this, and we are live right now on Periscope, which is Twitter, Facebook, on the One World Sports Radio Facebook page, and on YouTube. So you can actually interact with us, send us your comments, and we'll see if we can deal with them as we go on in the show. But it's myself and Paul. I've got Wahid and I've got AB. And we've also got Teppo, who in our Show Me the Money League, which is the Cheap Seats League, is number 2 behind AB. So we thought we'd get him on to have a little bit of chat this week. How are you doing? Anybody? How are you guys
doing?
I'm all right.
I'm not too bad. Happy to be number 2. It's had very 2 eventful game weeks and had some gambles that paid off, so I'm happy about that.
Okay, yeah. that's good.
I'm doing good. My fantasy team is not. I've said that I've often said that it's a marathon, not a sprint. But at the moment, this marathon looks like I'm 100 meters in. I've twisted my ankle. I've fallen. I've dislocated my shoulder, and I still have 42 kilometers to run.
42 kilometers to run. How's mine? Mine is I'm still at the back of this. I'm still haven't crossed the start line yet. In that part of the race where everyone's because there's no space. So I'm like stuck in the back while people are busy sprinting.
Guys, I have no experience in marathons, so I think I've literally just started sprinting, and now I realize, wait a minute, I actually can't run, so I'll probably have a heart attack and die, and you'll see me on the side of the road shortly.
Yeah. So Tempo, you're new to the Cheap Seats, but you're part of our wider One World Sports Radio family. How long have you been playing FPL for?
So my best friend, his name is also Tempo. He introduced me to FPL 2 years ago, and I won't lie, I was hooked. It just gives a different way of watching the sport. So now you're not just watching your favorite Premier League teams, you're watching like the best teams, you're watching every single team to see all the differentials. It's a whole new element to the game, and I must say I'm really enjoying it. So it's been an interesting 3 years. The first 2 basically started with me being very excited at the beginning of the season, and then the Christmas break happened. Happy for the double game weeks, then after that, your life goes on, and you just sort of leave your team and see what happens.
Yeah, so I hope I won't get there. I hope I won't get there. So what's the secret to your success, my man? You're number 2 on our league. What do you think has set you apart from the rest of us? I'm 29 out of like 30 people.
Hey, data. I cannot stress it enough. This time around, I listened to multiple podcasts leading up to FPL, got the hype really high, looked at some other experts that sort of ended in like the 10,000s, have all their esteem there. And I just sort of look for the right technique and look for who they've been picking out. And you'll find that you have a lot more options and you'll make much better decisions based on that. So yeah, that's the whole thing. It's all about data. Know all the options that you have, and then make the best one accordingly.
So, what's your formation for the season? What's your optimal?
I normally go with 3-4-3. I feel that you get a lot more attacking turnover. You're more likely to get more goals from the fronts from having a front. 7 versus having 6. But the Liverpool defenders make it a bit complicated there. But you can also save a lot of money on defenders that cost like 4.5, 4.0 that can still play. Like look at your Mitchell from Crystal Palace. When Ferguson comes in, because they're the 2 people there, you're getting 4 for someone that plays, can still get a clean sheet. So yeah, try to max out your front lines because that's probably where you're going to get the most points.
Okay, Tempo. We're there. We don't want all your secrets yet. We're going to poke them out. So now, gents, this week, I think these first 3 game weeks, we've seen 20 penalties, and I call this a penalty palooza because it seems like everything happens with the new rules in terms of handballs and VAR. We've gotten a lot more penalties. I think at this stage last season we were less than 10, and we're looking to
8.
If you the numbers, yes, we're at 8 now. We're at 20, and if you extrapolate the numbers, you can get about 280 penalties throughout the season. How do you maximize and set your team up for that, or prevent your team from conceding a penalty because it's a handball? How do you set your team up? Do you set your team up in terms of, let's look for a goalkeeper who can save, run away from defenders who have a track record of handballs? Or do you, like I think a lot of us, find Bruno Fernandes and try to find other penalty takers to line the teams? Wahid, how are you thinking about in this format? What do you think we could do?
Yeah, so what I've been doing is I've been trying to study who's going to take your penalties in each team. And we talked about it a little bit last week, and we try to look at who the different penalty takers are, because this has become a very big part of Fantasy Premier League this year, is who's taking these penalties. With each team, we have different penalty takers, and the penalty takers, we haven't seen that many missed penalties so far. So I think it is a tactic to look at. Bruno Fernandes is one. There are others that obviously you need to look at. For example, I think that there's good value in Klitsch at Leeds. He's not very expensive. He's taking the penalties, and that's something we need to look at. Having said that, the Premier League reffing panel this week has had a chat about these handballs. Because most of the penalties we've seen have been from this dubious sort of handball that everyone's going, that's not a real handball. I mean, the Eric Dyer penalty should never have been a penalty. He had no control of the situation. So they have actually had a discussion this week to say that, listen, we need a little bit more leniency on the penalties for handballs in particular. So we'll talk about this in another show that's not FPL related, but we are going to have a situation where the first 3 game weeks aren't necessarily going to be consistent with the calling of the handballs, with maybe game week 4, 5, and 6. And I think, Paul, you might start to see just a slight overcorrection in the next few weeks for this handball issue. After the media outcry, after the public outcry, I wonder if you're going to see as many handball penalties given in game week 3, 4, and 5, or 4, 5, and 6 as we have seen in 1, 2, and 3. Other penalties, fouls in the box, you can't get around. Yes, we'll see those. But I think that we're going to see an overcorrection maybe for 3 weeks, and then we'll hit some sort of balance going forward. I do think we're going to see some form of correction in the next week.
AB, with that in mind, and still knowing that this rule is still there, so you'll still get slightly more penalties than normal, and there will be a correction. Which players are you considering in terms of structuring your team around? I know everyone looks at Bruno Fernandes, but are there any other players who take penalties and are also prominent in assists and scoring goals for their sides?
So I think you've touched on it quite nicely there, Paul. This penalty palooza that you aptly described is, in my opinion, going to be a very short-term phenomenon. Where he mentioned that the Premier League are looking into probably see a huge course correction this weekend. But what I think will happen is that there'll be far more. I think people will transfer in the likes of Klitsch and Mopé and the little guys who don't cost that much, but who are getting FPL points because they're taking penalties. I wouldn't necessarily do that right now. I would look into your more sustainable options, guys who belong in your FPL team, who are going to be staples for a season, who may not be performing really well right now. Guys like Kevin De Bruyne, guys like Mohamed Salah, who's no longer being mentioned right now because Mane scored a couple of goals the other day, and we know Liverpool like to play a ping pong match between them as to who scores goals. The Bruno Fernandes, selection is always popular, especially following United. You know, he's the guy who makes things tick. I think someone like Jamie Vardy showed on the weekend that he should be in everyone's FPL team. At 10 million, he's cheaper than Harry Kane, and it's not only about just being on form. The thing that Jamie Vardy does so well is that he works for every single minute of the game. So he's always in it. He's always in it with a shot. He's sniffing around goal. He's a proper predator, and he does take penalties as well. So I'd look at the guys who are more staples and more long-term sustainable options rather than the short-term guys.
Speaking about Jamie Vardy, quick question, gents, from Ravi. Vardy in or out for next weekend? You were hearing that he's got some sort of a niggle.
A hip injury.
Yeah, it's a hip injury. But it's gonna. I think with this one, my advice would be wait until that last hour. If you need to make transfers regarding Jamie Vardy, wait until that last hour because you just don't know. But follow the Leicester press conference to see if Jamie Vardy's the guy. Who's your penalty? Who are the penalty takers in your FPL side that you've chosen? You're saying, okay, look, I know this guy, this team concedes. Like, I know I put Bruno Fernandes in because Manchester United seem to have penalties. Regardless of the handball, there's always a...
United.
You know, so do you have those types?
Manchester. Yeah. I do have quite a few penalty takers. That was a big... that's something I've always considered in Fantasy Premier League because it's almost like a free goal. Even though that player might not have like the best of games, they could still catch a penalty. And that's where the likes of Bruno Fernandes in a team, let's be honest, Manchester United haven't been playing very well, but the scraping through in the end with literally penalties. You cannot fight the name Manchester United. It is there. It is very obvious. And they seem to be good at doing that. So Bruno Fernandes getting a lot of points there. And we can't ignore the fact that Mo Salah also scored, I think, 2 penalties in the opening week. And people that captained him, yeah, they got a flourish of goals there. So, yeah, with or without the new penalty rule, considering the fact that refs will still look at VAR and then apply the rule accordingly, it would be silly not to consider having penalty takers in your team. But with that said, most of the penalty takers are must-haves in your team anyway. Kevin De Bruyne is now on penalties for Manchester City. So, and that like, you can even forget about like his creative prowess before all of that. The penalties are just a bonus. Mo Salah as well, you'll have him in there for the assist and you'll get a penalty. Jamie Vardy, interesting stats with him is that in the game against Man City, I think it was only like he had 15 touches, like the least touches of all players on the field, yet he scored 3 goals. So the clinicism, is that the word? The clinicality of this man is absolutely incredible. And one person that hasn't been mentioned a lot, that seems to be overshadowed by the likes of Jimenez, is Danny Ings. Now,
yes,
Danny Ings in front of goal is a number 9. Yo, he knows where the goal is without even looking. Look at that goal he scored against Tottenham. He didn't even look at the goal. He knew exactly where it was, and he just struck it in. So, yeah, Danny Ings, yeah.
So speaking about Jamie Vardy, Ravi Reddy saying that, he said Vardy is the man. And then he says he's got Martial and Fernandes in, similar to, I think, most of us. He has Van Dijk in defense, which I think is quite an expensive option there, Ravi. But you seem to be doing better than me, so you know a little bit more. Mentioned that KDB was off color last weekend. Back in business next weekend, guys. Will Man City come back? Do we have an overcorrection with Man City players? Wahid?
Yeah, we usually see that from a Pep side. Once they get slapped around like that in a couple of weeks afterwards, we usually see a very, very different Manchester City. And I suspect we'll see that in the coming week, a very different City. The problem, though, is unless you're choosing Kevin De Bruyne, who do you choose? Because especially after a big defeat like that, you almost expect another Pep rotation. So are you going to be choosing Sterling? Does Pep back Sterling? Or are you dropping Sterling and bringing in Mahrez? Or is he playing Bernardo Silva this week? Or is he playing for Foden?
So he's playing. Where's the new signing? The other Rodrigo or the Ferran Torres?
Ferran Torres.
Yes. Yeah.
Look, so these are good players, and unless you're picking, so yes, I do suspect that there will be a City correction this coming week, but unless you're picking Kevin De Bruyne, I would avoid City. I really would. So yes, someone is going to take a gamble out there on someone like Ferran. On Ferran Torres or Sterling, they're probably going to score a hat trick. It's probably not going to be me because I never make these sort of decisions.
If City scores a hat trick, I think we're all screwed. Guys, moving on to a player who our buy and hold section of the show. This week we're going to discuss Timo Werner. I know he scored tonight, but from an FPL perspective, for these 3 game weeks, he hasn't gotten into the stride that we thought he might get into. He's only got 9 points in the 3 game weeks. He hasn't scored a goal in the Premier League. Does that change? And in that case, is it a buy, a hold, or a sell for you? So if it's a buy, if you don't have him in your team, if it's a hold, if you do, or if you want to sell him, he's in your team. If he's in your team, AB, what do you think? What's your view on Timo Werner?
So I think Werner's going to come right at Chelsea. It's only a matter of time. He scored a goal the other day. It was a great goal, actually, against Spurs. But, anyone can score against Spurs. So, you got to take that with a pinch of salt. Although they do have Palace and Southampton at home in back-to-back fixtures before they go to United. So chances are Timo Werner is probably a good idea to buy. He's probably the cheapest. Now he'll be for what I believe will be the remainder of the season. So you would have gained a 0.1 value there. Would I personally buy him? Probably not, because I'm going with a different strategy with my strikers. But I would say buy. Why not? Strikers are hit and miss most of the times. Raul Jimenez, for example, didn't do anything last weekend. It's luck of the draw with these guys. But yeah, I'd say buy for now. May as well. He's cheaper than he'll ever be.
Temple, firstly, do you have him in your side? Yes or no?
I do have him in my side, and I have a few comments on this. I've been thinking about this, marinating on it.
How long are you holding him for?
2 more games. So the plan is to hold him for 2 more games, because that gives me enough time to really check him out. As we've said, this man is looking fierce. He scored a screamer against Tottenham. And the fact of the matter is, even though he blanked against West Brom, he did hit the post in a game where Chelsea were sort of I don't know where they were for the first half. And had the game gone even longer, there could have been a little bit more. And we mustn't forget that in the game that Chelsea lost to Liverpool 2-0, Jorginho missed the penalty that Timo Werner won. That would have been an assist if Jorginho didn't do that hop, skip, jump thing. So he's also been come on, these penalties are pretty annoying, let's be honest. But the fact of the matter is, he's been a constant starter for Chelsea, a Chelsea team that are looking fierce, just like the cogs aren't connecting. So if you're going to buy him, I do not recommend you buy him, because there's still some time before he actually fleshes in and comes into his role. Wait for that week where he really strikes, then buy him. If you already have him, hold him. Do not sell him unless you have other fires to put out in your team. He's definitely worth a hold for at least 2 more games, and then you could move to Jimenez, because Wolves' fixtures are looking good. So it's just about these 2-week periods. If you have 2 transfers now, do it now. If you're waiting for that second one, you see, it really depends on your team. But soft hold for me.
Okay. Wahid, there's obviously first mover advantage. So do you expect people to just hold and wait for him when he starts scoring, or do you need to wait until that 1 goal happens?
So I've had him since game week 1, and as has been said before, I think that he's the type of player who just needs a goal. He just needs a goal, and he might go on a bit of a run. He's new to the league, but it's not like he's done nothing. He's got the assist in game 1. Should have had an assist in game week 3. He's now got a goal against Spurs, and I'm personally going to hold. I've got a small strategy. I've got short-term options and I've got long-term options. And my option with Werner was always more of a hold player. He wasn't one that I was going to get rid of if he didn't score in one particular game week. And during the last sort of week, I just thought that he's definitely is one of the sparks in this Chelsea team. They're struggling to get it to all work, but he does seem like one of the live wires. And whether he plays center or he moved to the left to let Abraham play through the center, we will see him playing, and I think he will do something at some point. So for me, he's a hold right now, and I'm going to hold on for two more weeks.
Okay.
At an absolute minimum, and I'll reassess from there. Your options at that price point are you either going up a price point to Ing, or you're coming down to Jimenez or Ings. And that's what you have to try and find where your value is. Is it going up from a Werner to a Kane, or from a Kane down to a Jimenez and spending more in midfield?
So
let's not discredit a guy like Alex Lacazette, because he's 8.5 and he scored in every game he's played.
Arteta rotation is my problem. There's going to come a time everyone's going to start crying because Eddie Nketiah is starting games, and you're going to be sitting there going, but why is Lacazette? And that's the reason why, for me, as an Arsenal fan, Lacazette's not even being touched, because in as much as I know he scores goals, I can get more value from a Jimenez at 8.5 playing every single game, and I know he will play every single game, whereas every Saturday or wherever Arsenal play, it's between Eddie Nketiah or Lacazette. It does look like Lacazette's got the number 9 jersey now, but for how long? But look, if you've got him in your team, carry. And to a certain extent, I'm playing in that 8.5 realm. I've got money to move up. I think I can move up to Jamie Vardy, but I'm waiting to see I just need one goal from Timo Werner to kind of okay, fine. The decision between him and Jimenez as my rotation players is like a starting as the whole striker who's going to give me combined about 18 to 20 goals. So that's where I'm at. Let's move on to the next section. What is your bargain buy of the week? The bargain player that you are considering in your wider squad, on your watch list, the guy you're watching. For me, I'm looking at Tyrone Mings from Aston Villa. As Aston Villa look very suspect from the back, he seems to be the guy who's getting a lot of points. 22 points already in the 3 game weeks. He gets involved in set piece situations, which sometimes look like the only way Aston Villa can score. And my rule this year was run away from centre backs, but he's the one centre back that I'm willing to put money on. He served me well previously. I think last season he didn't do that badly for me. And he's also a cheap option at I think 4.5 or I think
he's 5.
He's a 5 now, which isn't too bad as well, because I always have like one defender around 5. Tempo, your bargain buy?
My bargain buy. I'm looking at 2 people, but I'm leaning towards Podence from Wolves. The only problem is the rotation problem that we've been talking about. He has a bit of a niggle as well. But I mean, at 5.6 now, I believe, with the game weeks coming up, it's looking very nice. I would have even got him in last week. I know a lot of people did. And then he unfortunately blanked like most of the Wolves team. But I mean, Fulham coming up next. Shoo, that Fulham game, they were looking horrendous in defense against Aston Villa, a team that shouldn't really be dominating them 3-0. So Fulham is definitely Fulham and West Brom teams to target in terms of defense. And I think also Leeds, watch out for Leeds. They're also a very attacking, throw caution to the wind type team. So you might actually get a lot of points there. And I know that Wolves are playing Leeds and Fulham. So Podence is definitely a must watch. Also Lamptey from Brighton Hove Albion. The way he moves up the wing, wow, it is devastating. So 2 bargain buys.
Wahid, your bargain buy for the week? I think Wahid's a little bit frozen. We'll go to you, AB, your bargain buy.
Shame. I know this is a player what he actually likes, but I've been considering a guy like Harvey Barnes, purely because that Leicester team have a good few games coming up. I think it's West Ham and Villa at home, if I'm not mistaken. Two teams who they're very able to beat and beat well. And it's Harvey Barnes makes that Leicester team tick with Pratt and Matters in that midfield, depending on whoever goes. And Harvey Barnes, again, much like Vardy, is always working, always trying to get stuck in, and is in and around that box and can make things happen. So I wouldn't call him a bargain, but I just possibly someone to watch out for because he's at 7, which I don't think is bargain territory. But if you were looking for someone bargainable in that Leicester team, then it would be Dennis Pratt. He's about 5.5.
Yes.
Yeah, and both of them, I think when I'm looking at teams now or looking at players now, I'm looking at the percentage of ownership because you got to differentiate yourself somehow. And they're both under 5. I mean, Pratt is below %, I think. So, that's where I'm at.
Wahid, who's your bargain buy of the week?
So I have Ollie Watkins on the bench, but they've got Liverpool, so I'm not sure he's the best buy for this coming week. I've looked slightly differently at a bargain buy this week in terms of Jamie Vardy being touch and go. You have the option of going for Iheanacho, who has always done quite well when he's had to play for Leicester. He scores, he assists, and he might be the one to come in for Jamie Vardy this week. And he's sitting at under 6 at the moment. I think he's sitting on 5.8. A lot of people, his values decrease as he game weeks, and he just might be the one to in if Jamie can't play. I'm not sure if it would be him or Ayoze Perez to lead, but whichever one it is, I'm with Iheanacho if it was to actually lead the line, then Ayoze Perez, and I back him to score if, especially against West Ham, who we all know I don't really rate.
I took your advice. I took your advice on West Ham. I captained Jimenez, and look what happened. So thank you.
Big mistake.
4-0 against
Big
Wolves.
mistake.
Yes.
But that's the Leicester hedge from Wahid. It's a very nice hedge with Vardy out, Iheanacho in. And maybe that's what Ravi's going to have to consider coming to the end of close to the transfer deadline. Last question of the last section of the week, and that is captaincy options. We've got Everton playing Brighton, so Dominic Calvert-Lewin comes in as a captaincy option. Also Richarlison, if you're that way inclined. There's a KDB or a Sterling if you think he's going to score a hat-trick against Newcastle. Jamie Vardy / Iheanacho if you want to captain him. But obviously the niggle is something that you need to consider. They're playing West Ham. Danny Ings versus West Brom. Salah / Mane is the lesser owned of the two. So that's a differentiator there if you want to go with that. Unless there's a team in one of my fantasy Premier League leagues called Always Captain Salah. So maybe that's that answer. And then
Agreed.
I think the other one to consider is Aubameyang playing Sheffield. Sheffield haven't done well. Alba and Arsenal are. It's a hit or a miss. After I know they played Liverpool, but the whole 3-4-3 positioning doesn't seem to be working well up front. You guys captaining AB? Who's your captaincy options this week that you're considering?
For me, it's between the two strikers, between Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Raul Jimenez. It'll be a late decision. I just think it's time for Jimenez and Wolves to respond from that West Ham blip or thrashing, I should say. And they've got some good games coming up, so that's the one for Wolves. But Everton are very dangerous. Hey, Everton they've got the Merseyside derby next week, and I think they'll want to put the sword to Brighton. So Calvert-Lewin, providing he stays in his run of form, they'll be looking to that Liverpool picture in 2 weeks' time to be very good. So yeah, equally tough choices, and I'm stuck there.
Yes, AB going with Old Faithful DCL. Wahid, what's your captaincy option?
So I've chosen Salah already, but there were a few options. I was wondering if I should just throw caution to the wind and give the captaincy reins to Werner, because I'm just assuming that there's a big points haul for Werner just around the corner. And I think that would be almost a differential where nobody else is going to captain him. People are still sort of waiting to see if Werner can get some decent points. And I think that if you were to be able to pick the week that Werner does spring into life and spring into action and pick him as your captain in that week, I think you might be smiling. So yeah, my one is Salah, and Werner was almost a differential pick as captain. And then I looked at that Arsenal game against Sheffield, and the only Arsenal player I have is Willian. And you know, when Arsenal click as they did in the first week, almost everything seems to go through Willian. So I was looking at a very bad Sheffield side, and I was looking at if Arsenal do put the sword to Sheffield, I expect Willian to be at the center of a lot of good things that they do. So Willian came into my thinking simply from what he did in that first game week when he got 3 assists. So again, almost a differential sort of captain in Willian went into my thinking. So it was between those three. I've gone with Salah for now, but as we know, I changed my mind quicker than the weather changes, and I might change that to one of the differentials. I do have a lot of ground to make up, and I was thinking that everybody captain Salah, and the only way to maybe make up a bit of ground on everybody who has captain Salah is to maybe captain someone else.
That's what I tried to do last weekend, and it backfired handsomely.
That's a trap.
Thank you to Nuno Gomez for that Nuno Espirito Santo for that performance. Tsepo, who's your captaincy option this week?
So I have 2 captaincy options in my team. I have KDB against Leeds. I just checked he's away against Leeds. Leeds have conceded, although they've scored a lot of goals, they've also conceded a lot. Let's not forget that 4-3 game against Fulham. And the only game that they got a clean sheet in was against the Sheffield team that just couldn't find the back of the net. So, yeah, and as we said, Man City, if they're going to look to turn on, why not just turn on against a relegation side? But who knows? Who knows? And then my second option is Danny Ings, because West Brom have also been conceding goals. They've been leaking goals. It's absolutely crazy. A 3-0 lead against Chelsea, they basically lost within a half. So I think it's only a matter of time. They just need a secure striker, and they could come tumbling down. I think Danny Ings, if there's anyone that's going to do it, it's Danny Ings. Man is pretty clinical in front of goals. So yeah, and on the Timo Werner captaincy, he played West Brom last week, and that was the best time, in my opinion, to have done that. Going any further is going into very uncharted territory, very dangerous, in my opinion. But you know what? You got to risk it to win the biscuit, and if there's any time to risk it, why not now? Still early days when you could literally move to the top.
Man.
Sorry.
Forth and conquer, keep that number 2 going, because we're coming for you. Finally, last thing before we go, quiz question of the show. Last week, we saw a lot of wildcards being used. I, for one, used my wildcard. How many wildcards were used in game week 3 across the entire?
Was it 400,000?
I was gonna say
that's your number.
460,000.
460,000. AB.
Cheapers. Let's go with $1 million. Why not?
Okay, so the answer is AB is the closest. It's 1.2 million wildcards were used in game week 3, and here's the funny part about it. We saw a lot more wildcards, a lot of wildcards being used in game week 2 because of that City situation with Manchester United. Those who used the wildcard in game week 2, their average score was 58. If you didn't use a wildcard, all those people's average score was 59. Going to game week 3, the wildcard average score was 41.
Sure.
The average, if you didn't use a wild card, was 43. So the lesson here is don't take a wild card. leave it. Yeah, so gents, I think thank you very much for coming on to the Cheapseats. Thank you very much, Seppo, for coming on. All the best with setting up your squads and the next game, week 4. Go forth and conquer. I pray for, okay, I hope you guys have many points, but not as many as me. So yeah, so guys, thank you very much for joining, and everyone who's watching or this video, watch it live or delay later on. Please do like, follow, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on the various social media platforms. You can see that our Twitter handles are sprayed there. We've got the guys have some nuggets. Wahid has transfer news that he likes to retweet. AB retweets a lot of Ed Woodward hate and echo chamber. I don't know what Timo tweets, but Timo's a very nice guy to follow on Twitter as well, with all the sport that he covers. But yeah, guys, thank you very much. Please do follow, and till next week, have a great time, and we hope you get as many points as Timo and AB have had so far.